Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. On today's show, Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been sworn in as Nigeria's new president and is now tasked with reviving Africa's largest economy. I'll be exploring his administration's potential paths for prosperity with the chief economist at PwC Nigeria, Andrew Nevin, who'll be joining me from Abuja, and Bite Oduneye, the chair of Nigerians in the Square Mile, who'll be joining me shortly from Lagos. Then later, Landry Nintretse, the African Managing Director at Free50.org Africa, will be joining me from Sweden to take me through the findings of a new report that suggests the continent still has a long way to go in ensuring citizens living in sub-Saharan Africa have access to modern energy service. But first, in case you missed it, Elon Musk has reclaimed his position as the world's richest person after dethroning French multi-billionaire Bernard Arnault from the top spot. The Tesla CEO saw his wealth jump over 40% this year to $192 billion US. In December, Musk was knocked off the first place by the LVMH CEO following Musk's $44 billion acquisition of Twitter. Arnault is now the world's second richest man at $187 billion, followed by Amazon's founder Jeff Bezos. To British News Now, Rishi Sunak will visit President Biden at the White House next week for discussions on Ukraine, supply chains and the economy. The meeting will be the first time that the Prime Minister has travelled to Washington since becoming leader of the Conservative Party in October. The meeting comes after Biden's trip to Northern Ireland in April to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so the Prime Minister's been in Moldova this week talking about migrants with the EU, but then we got the announcement that he'll be heading to Washington next week for his first official visit there. Of course, there was that pretty awkward encounter in Northern Ireland with Joe Biden. It was supposed to be a bilateral. I think some critics have said it's a bilatte. What expectations do you think we should have about this pretty important meeting?
Yeah, well, I think they're keen, obviously, Number 10 and Rishi Sunak to big this up, to make this as sort of newsworthy as possible, because famously Joe Biden has been accused of being anti-British, as you say, after he went to Northern Ireland for a very, very short whistle-stop tour that really nothing happened in, and then he went and spent a lot longer in Ireland, which he wants to talk about a lot because of his Irish roots and because of his re-election, and so a lot of people saying that
we were shunned.
Exactly, that maybe it was a little bit disrespectful to Britain. So this is an important thing for Rishi Sunak. Crucially, though, they're not going to be talks on a trade deal. Right. Brexiteers are very, very keen to talk about a free trade deal with the US when we left the EU, and that hasn't happened and hasn't looked like it's close to coming. So this will be talks on things like Ukraine. I'm sure there will be some trade discussions. There'll be other issues about Russia and obviously probably the
China.
Yeah, China and things like that. And I think Ireland will probably come up as well, and Brexit, things like that. But they haven't really been too specific about what's going to happen. But I think it's more the optics of Rishi Sunak having his first official visit to Washington, to the White House, and all the photographs that will go around that. That's very important for him personally, and also probably for the Conservative Party to show that he's the person in power. Rachel Reeves, the Labour Chancellor, the Shadow Chancellor, did go last week to lay out Labour's economic plans, and a lot of people talking about maybe Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives should be doing similar. They should be sort of talking about what they're going to do in response to Joe Biden's big announcement that how they're going to tackle the economy with his Inflation Reduction Act that a lot of people have been talking about and saying that it's such a good thing. So obviously politicians keen to go to the US, keen to look like they're statesman-like, but there's no specifics here and there's no obvious sort of this is what's going to happen here. But I think that Rishi Sunak wants to appear shaking hands with Joe Biden outside the White House and look very statesman-like, so that maybe when there's an election, people remember that and think, oh, he's the grown-up. Exactly.
How do you think Rishi is performing at the moment? Some say he's on the ropes. Do you think this is going to boost his kind of statesmanship?
I think it will boost it. And I think, remember when we were talking about when he first took office, how hard a job he was going to have to keep the Conservative Party together with all of its different factions, with so many people who are in the Boris camp, so many people in the Truss camp, so many people wanting... Exactly. I think from that perspective, he's done pretty well, right? There's been, there's no calls really for him to go. We're not talking about another leadership election. We're not really looking at anyone else sort of coming through. Of course, there's Suella Braverman, and that is a slight issue. But I think given all of that, he's done pretty well. I still think there'll be a Labour government whenever that election comes along. I think most people do. But I think, given what we've seen before with the Boris Johnson government and Liz Truss government of a couple of days, he's done pretty well.
Yes, I'll quote you on that, Simon. Thanks very much. Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been sworn in as Nigeria's 16th president, having been tasked with reviving Africa's largest economy, healing ethnic and religious divisions, and tackling security issues. Having endured 2 recessions in 5 years, Nigeria faces unprecedented levels of inflation, high unemployment, and heavy reliance on dwindling oil revenues. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Andrew Nevin, PwC's chief economist in Nigeria. Andrew joins me from Abuja. Andrew Nevin, it's always a pleasure having you on Channel's Business Global. So it's been all over the news, of course, that Nigerian stocks rose to a 2-month high on Tuesday, just a day after we all witnessed the swearing in of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Do you think this is a flash in the pan or a sign of more to come potentially?
Well, I think we all understood the enormous economic challenges the country's faced. I mean, in the 8 years of the Buhari administration, the average GDP growth rate, I think, was about 1.5% over the 8 years. And of course, the population growth is at least more than 2.5%. So the country was getting poorer and poorer. And there were big expectations that His Excellency, the new president, would take on the economic challenges. And of course, he's come out with a bang, kind of taking the fuel subsidy off in the first few minutes of his speech. So I think that the expectations are there. I think he feels the weight, from what I've heard from people who are involved in the administration, he feels the weight of history on his shoulders. And I expect we're going to see a lot of economic changes in a very short period of time.
You're absolutely right. Of course, we can't avoid talking about the fuel subsidy. I think most governments have tried to avoid ending it. Good Luck Jonathan tried. There were huge protests. It didn't lead anywhere. Are you surprised he made the announcement so soon, announcing it on television live during his inauguration?
No, I wasn't surprised. I mean, let's begin by acknowledging, in fact, all 3 major presidential candidates said the fuel subsidy would have to come to an end. Everyone in the country understands it has to come to an end. I mean, the numbers are so enormous, it's consuming the nation. There's one number that says it's 400 billion naira a month subsidy paid by NNPC. I mean, that essentially means that 200 billion naira are not going to LGAs and state governors. They can't pay their salaries on that. It's the biggest line item in the budget. There's other estimates that say it's as high as 600 billion a month, because you actually need to do it. They're doing the 400 billion at the official exchange rate, but the real parallel rate is higher. So however you cut it, it's enormous, and it was consuming the nation, as I said, and it had to come to an end. So we all knew it was coming to an end. It was a part of the party platform of all 3 parties. And of course, President Tinubu, he did it. And there's no budget provision after June 30th anyway. So it was coming to an end. And I don't think people should be surprised. I mean, we've been talking about it for 10 years. We all knew it had to come to an end. And now it's come to an end.
Absolutely. Fixing the economy obviously is a matter of urgency. It can no longer be kind of a buzzing statement. What policy changes do you expect over the next 100 days?
Well, I think there's obviously going to be a unification of the FX regime. Whether it goes slowly or quickly, I'm not sure. I mean, judging by what's happened on the foil subsidy, it might go quite quickly. There was some buzz in the media today about devaluation, the I&E window, and then the CBN has actually just come out and denied it. So I think there's some confusion there. David Malpass over at the World Bank, the CEO of the World Bank Group, has come out and put out, I don't know whether in response to Nigeria's situation, but a very forceful document and tweet about the damage that's caused by these multiple exchange rates, essentially a form of corruption. So I expect that will be the next big thing that we're going to hear about. But I also think that the President Tinubu, His Excellency, needs to show some some sensitivity to Nigerians that rightly say the government doesn't spend the resources it has wisely. So you have people who go around talking about resource mobilization. In fact, the World Bank, we need to raise taxes on people. And yet, at the present time, the way the government uses the resources is very poor. We have the 3 refineries that are not operational after 8 years of the Buhari administration. I can't even keep track of the billions of dollars that they've consumed. We have Ajaokuta Steel, which is not operational. We have the terminal at which the government borrowed $500 million from the Chinese to build at Lagos into new international terminals, essentially not being used because it wasn't constructed properly. $465 million that was allocated and borrowed for the CCTV camera project in Abuja. As far as I can tell, there's no camera project. So you look at in a sense, the waste, and of course, the very large number of MDAs that none of us can keep track of, but it's over 1,000. Every one of them has to be funded. National POPSI was funded 800 billion naira for the census, 200 billion of which has been spent. And the census is then delayed. And in comparative countries, they spend about a third per capita than this amount. So people are looking at these numbers, and they're looking at the salaries of the senators and the cost of running NAS, and they're saying we need some action on these fronts as well. I mean, maybe we're going to take the pain for the individual of a foil subsidy, particularly the middle class, being eliminated. There has to be something where the government sends a signal that says it's not going to waste Nigerians' resources. And if it sends a positive signal there, then I think we'll start to be in a good place. But this is going to require some hard decisions. I mean, the Orange Shea report was produced in 2013. There was no action. And this is, of course, I think your viewers would be familiar. It's a report that talks about the streamlining and consolidation of the MDA structure at the federal government in Nigeria. It was written in 2013. Was finally accepted by His Excellency President Buhari in March of 2020, right around COVID. There was no action taken. I think that's got to be on the agenda of the new president, His Excellency, in the first 100 days. So I think some of those bold decisions. He has one thing I think that's very positive from the end of the Buhari administration, which is moving electricity from the FGN list to the concurrent list. And so now states can start to make some action. Of course, Lagos, like always, is a leader in that. But I actually expect every state's going to figure out how to produce electricity for its indigents in the current environment. One of the things that's happened since I was a child is the electricity technology has changed so much. So when I was a kid, I grew up in Niagara Falls in Canada. You had this image of a big grid, a big source of production, but there's now so many different ways to produce power in this country, whether it's small-scale solar, waste to energy, gas, LNG. All of these are the mix. The way you do it actually needs to be figured out at a smaller unit, not at the federal level, but at the state level. So I think that's an area that we're going to see a lot of innovation as well.
Goodness me, hopefully the change makers are listening. It's an unenviable intro. And like you said, some difficult decisions. Just before I let you go, some more numbers for you.
Well, sorry, Juliana, I don't think these are difficult decisions. I think the country, what happened in the Buhari administration, in my view, is we talked about, as PwC, we talked about all of these decisions in 2016, 2017. I used to give a speech and I talked about the country getting poorer per capita in 2015, 2016, 2017, 20. I eventually stopped because at some point everyone understood all of the bad news in the country. Yeah. And, I like telling the good news. And I'm very optimistic, in fact. So it looks like a big in-tray. But I think we've come to the point in this country that everyone understands there's certain things that need to be done. Yeah. And there's so many positive things happening in the country, particularly in the digital economy, which is growing so fast. I mean, the incredible number of young people who now work in global value chains digitally from Nigeria. And this is happening across the country. I was talking to an amazing young man in Kano who found remote work with a telecommunications company in Canada on his own, paid a good salary, buying his parents a house, and that is being duplicated as well. I also think there's a lot of state governors, not every governor, but a lot of state governors that are really producing solid economic plans and following up on them. Edo State, of course, comes to mind, where you have the cultural industries, the Benin bronzes, and the museum that's being built, but also the palm oil plantation, also the digital economy they're involved with. Equity's involved in the digital economy. Many state governors are really coming up, recognizing they need to build an economic plan for their state. So I don't think this is bad news at all. I'm very optimistic about the future of Nigeria. I think the new president has shown he's prepared to take some of the difficult decisions that we all knew needed to be taken and were simply delayed. And he started out on his first day taking one.
It's always a pleasure feasting upon your knowledge. Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist at PwC Nigeria. As I said, I know the change makers are listening. It's going to be tough, but again, I share in your optimism. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Very welcome, Juliana. Great to see you.
Now, before the break, we were talking about the daunting economic challenges facing the new administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We'll continue that discussion, but pivoting slightly for a view from the diaspora. Bite Oduneye, chair of the City of London organisation Nigerians in the Square Mile, or NISM, joins me now from Lagos for more on this. Bite Oduneye, it's a pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global. So the Tinubu administration has begun. I know you're in Lagos, not in London at the moment, but what has been the sentiment from those you represent at Nigerians in the Square Mile, who are professionals living in London, and of course, some of your investor clients?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Juliana. It has been, it does seem like it has been something we've waited for a while. And with that, I mean, for the elections to finally come to a conclusion and for them to actually swear in the president. Now, there's a lot of coming together that the president does need to do, because there's a large percentage of the population that are still dissatisfied or not happy in terms of how the elections were conducted. But saying that, it's a new administration. He does have a track record of some sort in Lagos of being businesslike. So there is a certain level of excitement, considering we were coming from a very difficult past 4 years. On signing him in, we saw the Nigerian Stock Exchange, I think, rally by about 5%. I think the highest rally since the new president has come in. So the sentiment is good. Yes, one of the things that at the moment in Lagos, we are seeing difficulties with petrol, because he has mentioned they will be removing the subsidy. That has given a bit of a negative impact, because the queues are building up on the roads. But overall, on the general, there's a general positivity that is going to be a change from the last administration. From the Nigerians in the Square Mile, which I chair and I proudly represent here, again, it's the same sort of thing. There's the opportunity to restart that relationship with the government of Nigeria. Obviously, there's going to be a drive for infrastructure, a massive drive towards business, is what I understand from a number of people within the party. And we believe that there's going to be enormous opportunity for us to increase, those partnerships between the United Kingdom and Nigeria. And this is quintessentially driving business, a lot of things to do with business, better policy to make things a bit easier. We expect, again, from what we've heard, the issue of the UK visa policy and how Nigerians, that relationship in where a lot of our talent is going over to the United Kingdom. We expect the new president to address that, or try and put in case policies where the brain drain is not as difficult. But there is, on the overall, there is a certain level of excitement. And from an investment point of view, again, it's exactly the same thing. His track record in Lagos State was phenomenal. Lagos State is, I think, it's the 6th largest economy in Africa, and he has been, very hands-on with Lagos State. So we're expecting, if he was to do the same thing and on the federal level, we're hoping that yes, we might start off with a bit of difficulty with the removal of the subsidy, but we're thinking the belief generally is genuinely positive. That for the first time in the country's history in a very long time, we have a businessman president that understands policy, and we believe would turbocharge the economy. So there's a lot to look forward to, a lot of genuine hope. Of course, a number of people are unhappy, as I'm sure you are aware, as the result of the elections. But it's difficult to say move on, especially when you're telling them to move on, because they are aggrieved. So there's a lot of bringing us together that needs to be done. But from a business point of view, I think there's a wave of we're quietly positive.
Well, we hope so too, Bite. Thank you so much for your analysis there. Bite Oduneye, he is a general partner at ODBA, which is an African-focused venture capital firm. And of course, he's the chairman of Nigerians in the Square Mile, also known as NISM. Thank you so much for your time today, Bite.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now to our final story. Recently, 350africa.org unveiled the findings of research that reflects on the barriers of renewable energy and climate change policies in parts of West Africa. The research focused on the state of renewable energy in Benin, Togo, Ghana and Nigeria, highlighting potential areas of intervention to support the adoption of renewable energy and foster a just transition to renewable energy across the continent. Well, for more insight on the findings, I'm now being joined by Landry Ninteretse, the Africa Managing Director at 350.org Africa, the organisation that published the report. Landry joins me from Uppsala in Sweden. Landry Ninteretse, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Talk to me about this new report. Why was it conducted and what were some of the main conclusions?
Thank you very much for having me today. The report that 350 has commissioned wanted to analyze the state of renewable energy in 4 countries of West Africa to understand where those countries are in terms of adopting, integrating, and implementing the right solution to the energy crisis. So some of the findings that are in the report have identified some of the gaps, many lacks, lack of awareness, limited technical competencies and know-how, limited investment, financial mechanism to facilitate and promote investment in the renewable energy sector. But the report didn't stop there. It also addressed the opportunities and what should be done at different levels if we want to really to see a significant uptake of renewables. So that also includes the increased advocacy and more political will to demand the resources, the technology, and review the policy as well that allow a smooth and kind of increased implementation of some of the programs that have been adopted for a while but are taking a bit long to be implemented.
Just when I was doing some background reading before this interview, I came across an article in The Economist, and the headline said, Africa will remain poor if it doesn't use more energy. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, because we all know what energy can do to unlock, societies and communities that have been left behind. So, but the question is, what type of energy are we talking about here? Are we going to continue with the same, classic model of oil, of gas, and coal that unfortunately haven't been able to solve the energy deficit that most of these countries in? Or shall we rather tap into this renewable energy alternative that are available, that are affordable, and most importantly safe, and can not only address the energy gaps and energy poverty, but also create safe livelihoods for the community, and also create also jobs, because it's not just a matter of addressing the energy crisis, but it's also looking at how that type of energy affect our surrounding, affect our way of living, affect our daily activities. So we believe, and the report has pointed out, that by tapping to renewables, there are a lot of sectors that are likely to be unlocked, and of course, poverty is a key and is an issue affecting millions of Africans out there.
Absolutely. Fascinating insights in that report, which I have read, and I urge our viewers to do that too, and hopefully it will lead to the changes that you recommend to the experts. Landry Ninteretse, the African Managing Director at 350.org Africa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.